Welcome to Motivated to Lead podcast, helping you become a better leader. I'm your host, Mark Klingsheim. Hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining us for our podcast this week. My name is Mark Klingsheim with SEMA Partners. Each week, we interview leaders and they share lessons learned from their careers. Our goal is to help you become a better leader. We are taking some time out to revisit some conversations that we had previously with some great leaders. This week, we're happy to revisit our conversation with Shellye Archambeau. Shellye has been a CEO. She serves on a number of boards, and she has just a great story to share about her career and life experiences. She was the CEO of MetricStream, a Silicon Valley software company, and she led that company successfully for a number of years. She serves on a number of boards, including Verizon and Nordstrom. And she wrote a book recently entitled Unapologetically Ambitious. Looking forward to revisiting our conversation with Shellye. It's great to have Shellye joining us today and looking forward to our conversation. I guess first off, Shellye, could you give us just a little bit of an overview of your career and just some of your highlights of your story?
Certainly. And first, it's great to be here, Mark. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely.
Sure. So, I guess the best way to sum up my career is I've been intentional my entire career. I set out early to become a CEO. I didn't know exactly what that meant, but I made it my goal. And then I worked my entire career to achieve it. Along the way, I learned that there was something called a board of directors and that the board of directors hired and fired the CEO. So I said, okay, that's what I want to do too. And I started out in IBM with the aspiration of becoming CEO of IBM. I spent 14 years working hard towards that, did well, but it wasn't clear to me that I was actually going to get that spot. And becoming a CEO was more important to me than becoming successful at IBM. And so I said, all right, let me work my way ultimately to Silicon Valley, which is what I did. And I built, or I should say, I restarted a company that was pretty broken, ultimately called MetricStream, and built it into a global market leader with an amazing team. And now I serve on public boards, advise companies, coach some CEOs, and try to make an impact in a number of areas.
Well, I finished your book, and it's definitely, I encourage people to read it. I told you before we got started, you're a great storyteller, and you tell some personal stories and are really vulnerable as far as in the book of sharing things that from your growing up as well as throughout your life, and encourage leaders to pick up a copy. Tell me a little bit as far as kind of your motivation to write the book.
Certainly. I have tried to be really accessible my entire career, Mark. I was very fortunate. I got lots of help along the way, and I wanted to be helpful to others along the way. But as I got more and more responsibility, I could still respond, but I couldn't meet with everyone that wanted to meet and pick my brain, hear my story, right? Get the strategies, all of that. And it literally was killing me. I'm like, I hate the fact that I can't meet with everybody. So I said, all right, when I get to phase 2, I'm going to write it down. I'm really going to write down kind of what made Shellye Shellye and the approaches and strategies, the tactics, the hurdles. I mean, all those things that I managed through and over and, hardship, tragedy, everything. I just want to write it down so that I can share with others, because I really want other people to be able to achieve their aspirations. And it really pains me that so many people don't. So I'm hoping that through this book, I'm able to share a couple of tips, some key takeaways that enable others to improve their odds to achieve what they want, because the odds weren't in my favor and I managed to do it. So I want to help others who feel the odds aren't in their favor either.
Right. So I know you talk a lot about just kind of your journey through your career, but if you were just to distill down, if you're able to go back to talk to a Shellye who is 22 years old and give her some advice, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give her?
The first would be, don't take yourself so seriously. And the second is, make sure people know what you do. So many times, most people don't know what what others do. I honestly didn't know what my dad did. I knew he worked for a company, but in terms of what his exact role is and what that meant and the whole bit, I didn't know what that was. And in business, I find the same thing. At best, people will tell you what their title is. You ask the question, what do you do? Oh, I'm, director of operations. That actually doesn't mean very much.
Right.
So it's really important to actually tell people what you do, because if they know what you do, then they learn what kind of skills you may have. And therefore they may think of you for opportunities, for growth things, for you never know what. But just having a title, because it means so little from one company to another, really isn't helpful.
Think back to kind of that first leadership position that you were in. You spent time at IBM. You had great training. You kind of grew up through the ranks of sales. But think back to that first time that you were leading a team. What do you wish you would have known prior to that? That
it's okay. That the first time, it's okay that I don't know everything. It's, when I first became a leader, I was like, okay, I'm like the boss, so I'm obviously supposed to know everything, and I don't know everything. So that's like, oh, right. It just feeds the whole imposter syndrome and everything else. And bottom line is, you're not supposed to know everything. Every time you take a new role, especially promotion, a step up, more responsibility, you think you're moving up, and you are, but you're actually starting at the lowest rung of that particular job, learning curve ladder. So that's the way it is for everybody. You're not alone. Right. So it's okay.
Yeah, I loved in the book you share about you made it as one of the first African American CEOs in Silicon Valley, or one of a few especially during the time that you were able to accomplish that. But you said that when you got the call to join the board at Verizon, a Fortune 14 company, I believe, and that you walked into the boardroom and you felt like you maybe were a little bit out of place with some of the seasoned leaders that were there. Talk a little bit about that. You talk about kind of the imposter syndrome and just some of that feelings that can happen for people even later in their careers.
Absolutely. I have suffered from imposter syndrome my entire life. So it's not something that, you get over. And if you don't get over, think that you're failing because you haven't gotten over it. I'm just telling you, guilty right here, not gotten over it. What you learn, though, is how to deal with it. So yes, here I am. I've been a CEO. I've been serving on public boards for 7-8 years. I have done amazing things. I've had a chance to interact and meet with, amazing people all over the world. And I get ready to show up for my first first Verizon board meeting. And suddenly I'm like, well, Shellye, are you really going to be able to hold your own with this group? Look, the CEO of Walgreens, right? CEO of Darden Foods, CEO of okay, do you sure you belong? Do they know what you know, what you don't know? All that doubt. Oh my gosh. And you're so afraid that they're going to figure out, oh, you're a fraud, right? You really aren't the person that we thought you were. All that stuff. That's what imposter syndrome is. Right. And I felt it. And I was like, are you kidding me? Really? Really? So the good news is, as I got older, at least I could recognize it. And so you could sit there and say, come on now, right? But I do the same thing that I've done to handle it. How do I handle it? If I can't talk my way out of it to just say, okay, this isn't real, get yourself together, then I just put my shoulders back, I take a deep breath, and I just act the part. I fake it until I make it, because ultimately, I will know what I'm doing. So I just walk in and act like I know what I'm doing, because eventually I will. I always do. And by the way, that's true for everybody. Eventually you figure out the ropes. Eventually you figure out how to get it done. So all that self-doubt we have is just wasted energy. And I wish I could say it's that easy to stop. It's not. So I'm living proof of it. But the key is just figuring out how you work through it. And I talk about a lot of other ways to handle it as well in the book.
Yeah, it's learning to ignore that little voice in the back of your head that's telling you stuff that it's not helpful.
Exactly right.
Yeah. So talk about some of the mentors that you've had. I know you're mentoring, people continually now. I read one of the stories about one of the people that you're mentoring. But talk about some of the people that have had an impact on your life, the importance of having mentors, and talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Mentors have been super important to me in my career. And I really got very, very fortunate. I was probably about 6 years in IBM when I learned a huge lesson. IBM decided they wanted their high potential people to have mentors. And instead of assigning people, they said, all right, tell us who you'd like your mentor to be. So I picked a gentleman by the name of Roland Harris. He was a couple levels above me. I knew him, but I thought he liked me. I'm thinking, okay, this will be good. It'd be comfortable. This will be fine. So I put Roland's name. And literally, like a few days later, I get a call. It's Roland, Shellye. I'm like, oh, hi, Roland. Shellye, you put my name down to be your mentor. And I'm like, well, yeah, Roland, I thought you liked me. And he said, Shellye, you've got me. Go get somebody else. And that short exchange taught me so much. Number one, I have mentors that I don't even realize. It does not have to be a formal relationship. Two, right. I can have more than one. So I can have a lot. And literally, I approached the rest of my career just adopting mentors all over the place. So yeah, mentors have played a really key role for me.
Some of the executives that I talk to, they're involved as far as in their company. They have their heads down doing their jobs, but they forget about their network. They maybe network inside their company, but you talked about the importance of looking outside of where you are and developing those relationships. And that we've got a lot of younger leaders that listen to this podcast. And what advice would you give them around networking, the importance of keeping that network alive and thriving?
Yes, I actually learned this later in my career. And so it's one, I wish I'd known it earlier. And I learned it when I went to Blockbuster. I'm talking to one of their executives and they're asking me, so, who do you bounce your ideas off? Who do you strategize with? And I named some people in the company. And he said, oh, no, I mean outside of the company. And I was like, I'm supposed to have people outside of the company that I actually strategize and bounce ideas off of? I had no idea. I'd spent 14 years at IBM. My whole network was IBM. And it didn't even occur to me that I should be creating that outside of IBM. So, but I listen. If there's one thing I do, I absolutely listen. And so I said, great. And I started developing it and I never stopped. So the reason it's important is within an organization, you're all drinking the same Kool-Aid. So what happens is everybody tends to look at a problem and a challenge the same way. When you get someone who's outside, they don't have any of that, limitation on how they think or perspective. So it actually helps broaden the aperture and widen, kind of the views. So it's really very helpful. Now, it's not a lot of people. You can't be sharing strategy and stuff with a lot of people, but you want to have a few close, I'll call it advisors, supporters, et cetera, that you can indeed share that with so that to make you or help you, if you will, do a better job at the job that you have. So many people focus on mentoring and support to help them figure out what the next thing is. And that's fine, except you're not going to get the next thing until you nail what you have. Or even if you do and you haven't nailed it, eventually it's going to catch up with you and you're going to end up hitting a ceiling and not wondering, why can't I move any farther? Well, it's because there were some basics that you kind of skipped. So you want people around you to help you do the job that you've got really well as people to help you think about the future.
Good advice. Great advice. So there's one chapter you talk about, you're responsible for managing your own career. Nobody's going to do that for you. Your mentors can't do that for you, but you have to have a plan. You have to look at it. Think about just some things that you would say to somebody about managing your career and kind of the how did you approach it and how would you approach it?
Certainly. But first, let me just put in perspective. I want to put the exclamation point on this point about how important it is to manage your career. You would never spend $2,000, $3,000 on an airline ticket. Pack your bags, get everything ready, put the dog in a dog sitter, do whatever you have to do, head to the airport, get on a plane, strap your seatbelt, and then look at the pilot and say, so, where are we going anyway? Ludicrous, right? You would never do that. People do it with their careers all the time. They spend tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars on education and training and certificates, right? Experience, they go to conferences, they do all this investment in themselves, and then they wait for the company to tell them what they should be doing and what the next thing is. That's crazy. So, own your career. You are the only person that can optimize for you. Nobody knows you better than you. Now, what does that mean? That means being intentional. Deciding what is it you're trying to achieve? What's the best way of getting there? Do the research, do the homework, talk to people, let people know what you actually want to do. Find out what skills and experiences you need to have to be able to achieve what you want. Go build them, right? Go get them. I mean, this is so important. And so few people are intentional when it comes to their career.
Absolutely. So you've managed not only your career, but home life, and you talk a lot about that in the book of raising kids and having as far as the all the responsibilities that go along with that. Talk a little bit about that as you've managed your career, but also you've managed a lot of other things in your life.
Certainly. Well, I found that too many books and or stories are one-sided. You hear about the professional person, right? But you don't hear about the whole person. And so what happens is it all looks at times so easy. Oh, I took step 1, step 2, I had this little hurdle, took a leap, right? Got to step 3 and beam, boom, bang, I'm CEO. And it looks easy. So now when I'm trying to operate and execute, this is like hard. And so I'm thinking, gosh, it's so hard for me, and it wasn't for others, that obviously I must not be cut out for this. Wrong. It's hard for everyone. So I wanted to paint the full picture because, this whole notion about my work life and my personal life, no, I have one life. I am one person. And it all goes together. All the priorities come together. Everything goes together. So it was very important to me to talk about the whole life because it's hard. And I talk about hard stuff. So when you think about it, what I tried to do to work through it was really around prioritization. I call it ruthless prioritization, which is what's important to me, professionally, personally. Stack it all up. How much time do I have? And prioritize, which means there's things that you can't do or that you have to find somebody else to do. And that's the hard part, because saying yes to something is saying no to something else. So make sure you're saying yes to what you want to say yes to, so that you're not saying no to things that you actually want to do, but just ran out of bandwidth for, right? So set those priorities and then make sure in your personal life that everybody's like on the same page. Just like in business, everybody needs to have a common vision for what you're trying to achieve. Well, you know what? Personally, it's the same thing. What are we trying to do as a family? What are we trying to achieve with our kids, right? What is the kind of life that we want? Where all those things are important to talk about with your spouse, but also with your kids. Everybody's part of this. And just like you set expectations at work, most successful people are very good at setting expectations and then meeting or exceeding them, right? Okay.
Absolutely.
And we forget that whole notion when we go home. We set no expectations. We said none. And then we wonder why everything's all over the place. No, we have to set expectations at home too. It's quite all right. And it's healthy.
So you've had to make a lot of decisions around career in your life and kind of that. And one of the in the foreword, Ben Horowitz talked about a decision that you had to make, that he tried to talk you out of the job at Saplet and before they were joined with MetricStream. But talk a little bit about that, of those times that you've had to make tough decisions and maybe others that have been advising you have said, no, you shouldn't go that direction. And how do you make those decisions?
Yes, and that has happened to me all through my life. And I try to talk about a number of scenarios. It's personally, professionally. A lot of people told me that I shouldn't be doing what I'm getting ready to go do. At the end of the day, though, it goes back to what I said about your career. You're the only one that can optimize for you. Nobody knows you better than you. So yes, take advice. Yes, listen to counsel, right, and perspectives. But then you need to weigh all that in against your rubric, who you are, what you're trying to do, what risk you're willing to take, right? I mean, all those things, and then make your decision. Because people give excellent advice, absolutely, but realize where it's coming from. It's coming from their perspective and their vantage point, which is by definition going to be different. So just because you don't take advice, by the way, doesn't mean you should stop listening, by the way, to that person. So Ben is a perfect example. Yeah, Ben tried to talk me out of taking that job as CEO. Does that mean I stopped listening to Ben? No, I've totally reached out to him for advice, right? All along the way, because the perspective is what's important. It doesn't mean you have to agree on everything, but the perspective is absolutely important. But do have some courage and confidence in yourself, that you do know yourself, because many of us can think back on decisions that we made or things that we did that we really didn't feel we should do, but everybody was telling us we should do, and so we did, and you know what? It just didn't feel good, right? Or didn't feel right, or it ended up not being right. So you know best for you.
So as you're thinking about this time that we're living, it's a weird time with everything going on. What advice would you give to leaders during this time of crisis and disruption and people working remotely? Any advice you'd give to a leader at this moment?
Yes. Be empathetic and show that you care. A lot of people can work on strategy. A lot of people can build teams. A lot of people can put in place, right? Here's the execution game plan, right? All of that, hire people, all of it. But the ones that I find that are able to build organizations that sustain through good times and challenging times are leaders who are empathetic and show that they care.
Now, I know, Bill, you mentioned Bill Campbell in your book. He was a coach to some of the major executives in Silicon Valley, and I passed away a few years ago. I just read one of the books that talks about his life. Talk a little bit about, I know that was a part of kind of his philosophy, that people need to know how much you care about them. Talk a little bit about that influence in your life.
Bill played a huge role in my career. Absolutely. I met Bill when I was the chief marketing officer and EVP of sales at LoudCloud, which became Ops, where Ben was CEO. And Bill was on the board. So as a result of that role, I presented to the board every board meeting. And I got a chance to meet Bill, and I adopted him. But frankly, I think he adopted me right back. So we developed a great relationship. It was his, I call it vouch, that helped me get my CEO role. And, I put together a team. I had no peers when I became CEO. And I said, okay, I now get what people mean when they say you're lonely. And I said, I need peers. So I pulled together another group of women that were also building companies in the Valley. And I picked women only because there were so few of us, that there were challenges that were unique and different. So that's who my peers were. And Bill would meet with us once a quarter, and it was fabulous. So Bill played a great role in not just being a mentor and then a sponsor, but then also just the ongoing support was tremendous. And yes, Bill broke all the rules. And what I mean by all the rules is when he saw you, he hugged you, forget this, oh, be careful. Like, no, he saw you, he hugged you, he asked about your family, you know what I mean? He laughed, he cursed, he did. I mean, Bill was absolutely unique. But what you knew beyond a doubt was that he absolutely cared about you and had your best interest at heart.
So you sit on several boards currently, and talk about that. That's probably one of the questions that most of the CEOs I talk to that are maybe haven't sat on a board. They report to a board, but they're looking at adding that to their experience. What advice would you give a CEO that's looking to serve on a board?
First of all, I think board service is a fantastic experience for a CEO to have. It gives you back to that outside in view. You get a perspective of being on another board to see it from the other side. And it also gives you the opportunity, frankly, to focus on somebody else's problems and challenges for a few hours, right? Every so often. And that in itself, there's lots of learnings on how other companies approach things, on how they think, on priorities, on just views and perspectives from the board members that you can totally take back to help you do a better job at what you're doing. So I highly recommend pursuing a board if you're a sitting CEO. Just one, I obviously need to focus on what you have in front of you, right. But I highly recommend it. It's a great learning experience, and you'll be able to contribute.
So I see there's pictures on your mantle of family, and talk a little bit about the legacy that you want to leave as far as to those that come behind you, and family and friends. Talk a little bit about that.
I've been very fortunate in that I know a lot of my history. my family on my father's side, we can trace it all the way back to France, to Jamaica, to the States for many generations, which is unusual. Mm-hmm. And even on my mother's side, through slavery, we have the manumissions, the deed that prove that the slave is now free, right? Mm-hmm. We actually have in our possession, and therefore have the records of, okay, who had who and all those kinds of things. So I know from where I come, and I know that I'm only been able to do what I'm able to do because a lot of what others did before me. And therefore I feel absolutely compelled to share, give back, and help others. That's why I wrote the book. It was never a goal of mine to be an author, right? But I thought it was the best way to share at scale. So what I am trying to leave as a legacy is that people who have met me, gotten to know me, worked with me, touched me, read something that I've written in some way, right, that I have touched, feel that in some small way, I have helped make a positive impact on their life. That's what I want to leave as my legacy.
Yeah, very cool. Well, you shared just some personal stories around Scotty, your husband, and so sorry to hear of his passing. That he wasn't able to see this book come out in print, but I know he lived the story with you. But definitely appreciate you sharing just some real personal moments again. And what outside of work? Shellye, you're doing a lot these days. You sit on boards, you're consulting, but outside of work, what do you do to recharge?
I'm a people person. So I get my energy from people. And so COVID has been really, really challenging for me. But normally what I like to do is I exercise, I get together with friends to go see any performing arts. I love it all. Dance, concerts, music, ballet, whatever. I like all of that. And I like to travel. So a lot of things that I really like to do right now, I'm not doing. So that's hard. But I'm making it up. I'm making it up through, walks and hikes and things that you can do safely, right? Periodic backyard get-togethers, et cetera. But I also spend time on passion projects. So I do believe to those of us who have much is expected. And so therefore I am engaged and involved in a number of things, especially elements that surround helping women and people of color and folks from challenged backgrounds.
Great. So any parting advice you'd give a leader or a new leader?
Yes. So I guess my biggest advice to a new leader is the higher you go in an organization, the fewer decisions you should make. And while that seems counterintuitive, your job is to build new leaders. And if you're not enabling and developing people so that they can make effective decisions, you're not building leaders.
Well, this has been very, very enjoyable, and again, recommend that everybody pick up the book. Definitely look forward to seeing how you're continue to impact people's lives. How would somebody learn more about some of your work? And I know you can find the book anywhere books are sold, but
sure. You can go to Shellye.com, SHELLYE.com, and learn more about books, things that I'm doing, and background, what have you. I even write a blog and put stuff out there. I try very much to share. You can also follow me. I'm very prolific on LinkedIn and social media, so also connect with me that way.
Great. Thanks, Shellye. Wish you the best, and we'll look forward to seeing what else you write in the future.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time, Mark, and appreciate being able to participate in your podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Motivated to Lead podcast. Please subscribe on iTunes. You can also see a video version of this interview at motivatedtolead.com. This podcast is brought to you by SEMA Partners, helping you find your next great leader.